back to Block TV. Last I checked, I'm still Yael Lavie, and it is time for Block Doc, our weekly segment where we're graced with the presence of Dr. Lionel Wolberger, co-founder of the startup Platinum. Hey there, Doc. Sorry, Lionel.
Good to see you, Yael.
It's wonderful to see. And we're sitting here on the heels of a week filled with reports about the Boeing 737 MAX, as it's known. That horrific crash in Ethiopia. A lot of second one, exactly, and it made the bulk of the world ground that specific MAX 737. That said, many are blaming the software report. I think even earlier this week in the New York Times about that it might be the software. Should they be blaming it?
They haven't released any conclusions yet, but of course these aircraft are run by software, and more, not just aircraft, but even our cars will be run by software. So there's a lot of engineering around that. And they're right to look at the software and suspect it. These software engineers are saying if the software didn't work, then they'll blame the requirements and not actually the software, because computer systems are really very stupid. They do what you tell them to do.
At the end of the day, they're not human beings.
Yeah, they're not human beings.
They're not human beings. That also is arguable. But they're blaming the software, and if it was the software, what could have happened, consensus-wise, so to speak?
Yeah, so in a system like an airplane or a rocket ship or even a car, the computer systems have to be ready to achieve consensus. And consensus in computer science means reaching a state where they can agree on an action. And what they try to do is give redundant sensors. So I believe in the Boeing, they're talking about a sensor that could detect if there's a certain kind of updraft, in which case the computer would decide to change the control flaps. So that's the key information. If the computer gets information and then has to decide to make a change.
To make a change. Is that the same as people do?
Yes, I guess. When we reach consensus, what we tend to focus on the process of achieving consensus, which is a debate where I try to convince you. And in computer science, we're saying that's kind of done, and every sensor is saying what it decided. So this sensor says we're in trouble, and this sensor says we're not in trouble. What's the computer system supposed to decide? It got two messages.
Conflicting messages.
Similar, right. And how does it, and that is what consensus means when we look at it from the point of view of computers or from blockchain, where this plays a big role.
Exactly, that's a huge role there. And if we're talking about the blockchain, apropos, how do we circumvent that type of point, that type of moment in time where it's a that choice needs to be made?
Yes, because blockchain is hosted, the decentralized blockchains are hosted by anybody. You don't know who they are, and yet the system has to come to a consensus. So for example, in Bitcoin, the original blockchain, where a new kind of consensus was invented, Nakamoto consensus, we call it, after Satoshi Nakamoto. And there, it's actually really interesting, and it drew on older theories about 20 or 30 years old, which are named the Byzantine general problem and the general's problem.
Why Byzantine?
There's this idea, Byzantine was a terrible time,
It wasn't, not a good time in history.
It was Game of Thrones, it really was. Like there was one emperor who, he went to church and the choir was singing, and then the choir threw off their robes. They were actually assassins, but he was stronger. He grabbed the crucifix and he was batting them around. They cut off his arms and they threw him in a toilet. And that's how they would do transfer of power in Byzantine times.
In Byzantine times, it wasn't, it was slightly more cutthroat in terms of the decision. Okay, so Byzantine in computer theory means what?
So when computer scientists try to deal with these consensus problems, they talk about the Byzantine general. And I have a general here. Her name is Barbie. And her job is to command her troops.
Power to the women.
Let's just keep it simple. So here's another general. You can have her. And you
both
can name
two
her.
Barbie generals with unrealistic figures. Yes.
And they both need to attack. Now, this is a problem in game theory. So there's a little story around it which helps us focus on the issues at hand. So here's the story. The two generals are going to attack a city. If they both attack, they will prevail. But if only one attacks, they will all be killed.
Yes.
So and this is very important. So they can, as a group, attack, or as a group, retreat.
Retreat.
Those are both good options for the system. But if one attacks and one retreats, that's bad.
Right. I mean, that kind of reminds me of the rules of risk, in many ways.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
It's the rules of risk,
And
yeah.
focus, and also realize most of these people are men making these theories, so they like to pretend they're generals and.
That's why I really think it's the age of Barbie.
So
But
here,
yes.
so we've brought our Barbies, and it's in game theory, and it's really fun in a way. And I think anyone could do this. So the general says attack, which is just go, right?
Right.
So the general says go.
Reminding you, red Barbie general.
Right,
Yes.
and so you've gotten the command go, and you can go. It's pretty clear. And if you never got any information, then you would retreat, and you're okay. But the situation gets more interesting if there are more than two. Let's say there's a third general, like here, another good general, and this guy is a big, strong general. He's Batman. So now we've got two armies that we have to give information to. So the commander says go, and the commander says go. Now what the computer scientists figure out is that the system will work much better if the generals also talk to each other. So Batman says,
I was going to say, I think everything works better
when we
if people speak to each other.
and we
Yes.
keep communication channels open. So
Yes.
Batman tells Blue Barbie go,
Go.
and Blue Barbie says, I heard from the commander go. So now Batman says, I've got go, go, he goes.
He goes.
Blue Barbie
Blue
says
Barbie
go, go,
got
she
go, go,
goes.
she goes.
And we're okay, right?
Yeah.
Things get interesting when we talk about the traitor, the
Okay.
bad
And this is the bad general.
So let's bring on
Right.
a bad Barbie, Harlequin,
Right. Or I can just hold her. Yeah, I can just hold her.
and let's make room for her.
How does
So
it
now
work?
watch what happens. And what this represents.
I have to say, just for the record, that just because, you know, she's not lovey-dovey and doesn't wear a really tight,
No, it's
like
not her
dress.
clothing.
It's not her
It's
clothing.
what she's thinking.
It's what she's thinking.
So,
Okay. Thanks.
so the general says go
Right.
to everybody, right? And now they start talking to each other, and this is where it gets interesting, because Harlequin lies and tells Batman, I heard the general say retreat.
But she's lying.
She's lying. So they each get, and then they talk to each other, and this Blue Barbie sends her goes to everybody. And you can see that what's going to happen is they're not clear, it's not clear what to do.
Yeah.
Because Blue Barbie's looking at what she has. She's got two goes and one retreat.
How?
So can she just take the majority? So the answer is, and proven here in game theory, particularly it gets more interesting when you have more bad actors.
Right.
And it turns out that they've done the mathematics, and they've proven if 2/3 are loyal, then you can take the majority.
How
and
do you
it'll be
guarantee that
correct.
2/3 are loyal?
So
How do you know?
that's how this is. And that's called the Byzantine generals problem. And that's one problem in consensus. It's a
Right.
fascinating group of problems.
Okay, but which can work, though, usually not with three actors, right?
It can work with unlimited number of actors. And so, for example, it's this, and if we had more time, I could show you how it comes down to the 51% that you always hear about
Yes.
in Bitcoin. It's based on this kind of game theoretical analysis.
And then so many things to say. Now, let me ask you a question about this, apropos telling the truth and lying, and as you explained. But, you know, how does this work with people? We have to trust people on this, don't we?
So in the end, it's all about people. Our tools, our blockchains, our computers are extensions of who we are and what we want to achieve. So as we said before, when people want to achieve consensus, they're including the debate and then the actual voting and deciding whether things are going well. And there's a lot of innovation in this sphere.
Such as?
So I thought I would just share a few.
Please.
So first of all, electronic voting is actually a very controversial subject because just as in real life, people can buy your vote. You know, so you're showing up at the voting booth, you're casting your vote, but you're really what we call a sock puppet.
Right.
You're actually doing someone else's will. So here's an article just very recent going over some of the current innovations in blockchain, because blockchain, as you know, can be decentralized, as we just illustrated here, can have nobody in charge. And here's one that was cited there. I haven't investigated it myself, but it's called followmyvote.com. And it's a way of using blockchain technology to help us come to decisions and vote together.
Why is it so controversial? I'm wondering with you, because actually blockchain for voting at this day and age, I think, would be a perfect solution for so many. I'm not only looking at the elections of 2000 in the United States with the pregnant Chads, if you remember that, and how
Yes.
that went awry, you know.
But think also of all the controversy around social media
Right.
and bots and actors. So when we're looking at voting, we're really looking at security as a whole.
Right.
And one thing we always stress in security thinking is it's never one solution. You have to think of the whole story. And the way Adi Shamir, who invented asymmetric cryptography, tells it, he says, imagine that I come to your house, you want to protect your house,
Right.
and I give you this steel bar, it cannot be cut at all, and I put it right in front of your front door. Have I protected your house? No, because what will the robbers do?
They'll take it and use it against you.
Yeah,
okay.
They'll go around it and come in
And
through
come
the
from the-
window. So what you need to think of comprehensive thinking. And when you think of voting, there's issues of people being able to buy your vote, the authentication. Are we sure that you're actually the person who clicked
that
the
is
button?
voting, right.
So, but what's interesting is there's another startup, fairly new, and this went through the Y Combinator, so it has
Right.
some good attention. It's called democracy.earth, and here they're really looking at the bigger picture, and their response to these concerns about buying votes and selling votes is that this whole idea of parliamentary voting is an idea from the 17 and 1800s. And we have to start making new ways of voting. And they, very controversially, you can vote with your token, which is worth money. Similarly, Steemit, which is a
Which I have to
blockchain
say, I
done-
mean, that one can argue, I'm of the mind of arguing that if you get an incentive to vote, then you would vote. Yeah.
Good
So,
point,
yeah.
right? And so
you
pay
gotta
to vote.
incentivize people to democratize themselves.
So voting is an
Right.
area where we can see some innovation, and there's some people really doing a lot of deep thinking, and I think we'll be in for some surprises. I was just trying to add that Steemit was the second blockchain by Dan Larimer, who went on to do EOS, which is one of the largest
Largest
blockchains
ones right
today.
now.
And in Steemit, you upvote and you pay, and then the upvotes are what give your stories credit, and it's how you earn money. So this connection of cryptocurrency, voting, and then the actual vote itself, the token, is a place where there's a lot of innovation. And it goes back to these kinds of game theory. And if we have time,
Yes.
there's one other problem which is really simple to understand.
Show me,
It's
because
actually-
I think Harley's getting a bad rap. But yeah,
underneath the Byzantine generals problem, there's the generals problem.
okay.
So there's two generals.
Who-
And this
who-
is an ancient problem, right? Because it goes back to Julius Caesar sending out his horsemen. He has to communicate. He has to send a messenger. So the computer scientists just thought, let's just deal with this issue. And they
Right.
ended up deciding that it's an impossible problem. And in blockchain, there are two impossible problems that are very important to everything we build on top of that. It's
Which
good
are?
to know if something is impossible, because then we know we have to find another
I
way
mean,
to do
that's
it.
my method in life is know what you don't want to do
So this
first.
is a very simple issue. So
Yeah.
let's say who's talking to who here? Let's say
Right.
Barbie, but back to
Yeah.
Barbie and Batman. Okay.
Right.
So Barbie wants to just say, Batman, are you going to attack? If so, let me know. I'll attack also.
Right.
So Barbie says, are you going to attack? And her horseman goes out. The message gets. She never knows if it got there or not.
Unless the messenger come back, but maybe, Batman's like, I'm so upset at this message, I'm gonna kill you. Okay, fine.
So she has to wait for an acknowledgement. And the most basic protocol on the internet is called SYN, S-Y-N.
S-Y-N,
not sin.
yeah.
And then he acknowledges. He says, yes, I will attack. But then Batman doesn't know if she got the acknowledgement. So he doesn't know if she'll join him. So
Right.
he asks for an acknowledgement back. So then she sends an acknowledgement back. Here you go, Batman.
Yes.
But now she doesn't know if he got the acknowledgement back.
How do we solve this?
It has been proven that this is not solvable. So that's important. So, and then when we abstract it, what we say is, if the network is not reliable, if you don't know if your horseman will make it, then you can never solve this problem.
That should not be the network/software you use.
Right.
If
Now,
it's
if you're stuck with a bad network,
right.
then there's what we call workarounds. And the workaround is actually kind of brilliant. There are two workarounds.
Okay, what
One
are
is
they?
you be verbose. So instead of sending one, she sends 1,000 messages.
Just to make sure.
Some of them will get there.
Yeah,
Right?
those are the people we
That's
hate.
one workaround.
Yeah.
And another workaround is
Yes.
based on time. She'll send one message every 5 minutes. So if Batman doesn't get a message, he goes, whoa, wait another 5 minutes. The next
Right.
one might get through. And then he waits. Did you see 300 where the messenger
Yes.
comes?
Where the messenger comes and is
They
killed.
kill the messenger.
Exactly.
Right. But if they sent one every 5 minutes, there's such a good chance that one of them would get through and not be thrown into the pit
Right.
and die.
Flee and get back with the response.
So in blockchains, you'll see one or two of these solutions. One, the verbose one, where
Right.
they just send many messages, and the other where they just use time. And Bitcoin, which we mentioned before, so I'll come back to it, is one that's based on time. So for example, if I'm a miner and I make a solution and put out a block,
Right.
I earn a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars. But I'm actually not allowed to collect that money until 100 blocks have passed, which
Wow.
is 1,000 minutes. which is
I was
like
going
a
to say,
day.
that's exactly the problem that, one can argue we are facing right now, because it's way too long.
It's, right, but that's why there's a speed limit
Yeah.
there. It goes back to the generals problem and the Byzantine generals problem. And it's really, it shows that these modern innovations are based on some ancient thinking.
I think everything we do is based on some ancient thinking. When Leonardo da Vinci said first imagine. Well, actually, that was sorry. I'm leading you to something else. I think that when we're building on the things that our history is made of, it's one thing that we fix them, but it's another that computers do. Have I missed anything?
I think that consensus is a really interesting issue. People think it will be difficult, but you mentioned Leonardo da Vinci. Back then, they thought people would never fly.
Right.
And he tried, and I guess 500 years later, it's his 500th anniversary this year. There's a lot of celebrations, and we're certainly flying, sometimes crashing, but it's the exception.
No, even though there was a crash, everybody's still flying. Needless to say, because it's what we do. This thing ultimately, will not be stopped. It's just figuring those bumps on the way, and that's what blockchain
And I think
is there
with
to do.
consensus also, we're going to figure out the bumps, and these systems are going to help us make decisions together.
Amen to that, but that's also a lot of faith in mankind. I want to send us off actually with Harley. Doc, that was phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Always fun talking
Always
about
fun.
these things.
This was it. Wait a second, if we can zoom in on Harley. This was it for Block TV. Block TV, there we go. Bad girls unite. We're getting a bad rap, and we'll be right back.